In this video, we're going to take a look at the Samsung Galaxy S10 and see how well it performs when I put it through a bunch of different emulation tests. This is Steve from Restalgia, and let's get started. Okay guys, so I'm well aware that the Samsung Galaxy S10 is not the newest Samsung device on the market, but I did want to do a video on this because with the release of the Samsung Galaxy S20, the price on this guy has come down quite a bit, and for people who are looking to upgrade, this might be a good option for them. Now obviously people do not buy expensive smartphones in order to emulate them, but it is a nice side feature to have, and the ability to do so is actually something that I think is pretty cool. Now in terms of this device, I'm not going to be doing a review video, or I'm not going to be doing a showcase video or anything like that. This is my personal device. It's the one that I've been using for a good year now, and honestly I love the phone. I use it for a lot of my filming as well, so it's just an overall good phone, but I do want to showcase how well it can emulate. Now in terms of apps that you can download from the App Store, it can pretty much run anything at the highest quality settings, and you're going to get incredibly good performance. Now in terms of its technical specifications, we have a 6.1 Quad HD Plus dynamic AMOLED display with a resolution of 3040 by 1440. And I do gotta say, the screen on this thing is absolutely brilliant. It looks really sharp. In terms of the CPU that's built into this, we have the octa-core Snapdragon 855, and this is an absolute powerhouse of a processor. It's also going to come outfitted with 8 gigs of RAM, and my specific device has a storage of 128 gigabytes internal with an expandable SD card slot, which can accept up to 512 gigabytes of additional storage space. In terms of its battery life, we have a 3400 milliamp hour non-removable battery, which does get us through an entire day's worth of work if we are using it quite a bit. And then it has a whole host of other features like wireless charging, an embedded ultrasonic fingerprint scanner, and even a 3.5mm headphone jack. Taking a look around the device, if we take a peek at the top, this is where you're going to have access to both your SIM card slot as well as your microSD card slot. Along the left-hand side of the screen, we are going to have our volume rocker as well as a convenience key. On the bottom is where we're going to locate our 3.5mm headphone jack, which is really nice because a lot of companies are getting rid of this, and I do like that it's still here even though it's probably going to be the last model with it. We also have our USB Type-C charging port and a speaker along the bottom as well. And then over on the right-hand side, we don't have much other than a power button. Now, like I said, I'm not going to be doing a full review, but I will tell you that the cameras on this thing are really good. They can record up to 4K, and like I said, I do use my phone for any sort of stock footage or B-roll that I need to record for my channel. But that's more or less it in terms of what I'm going to talk about with the device itself. What I want to do is showcase to you guys how well it runs in terms of some of the most difficult consoles to emulate. Now before we jump into any gameplay, I am going to mention a couple of things here. In terms of all the footage, I am using my 8BitDo SN30 Pro Plus controller for all of the gameplay, to navigate through all the menus and to play the games, but additionally the Samsung Galaxy S10 has two ways that you can actually take what's on screen and display it on a TV or on a computer. The first one is the Samsung DeX application, which is pretty cool, but I did find that when I was using Samsung DeX to play certain games, there was a little bit of an audio delay, so I actually didn't recommend using that for gameplay specifically. The other option is to directly screen mirror either on a monitor or on a TV. Really simply, you just need to grab a USB-C to HDMI adapter and you can plug it into any TV. It'll automatically display what you have on your phone onto that screen. That's what I'm going to actually do to show you guys the footage, just rather than having the camera pointed at my screen and you guys seeing glare from lights or anything like that. So we're going to go ahead and jump into some on-screen footage so you guys can get a better look at everything. So the very first thing that we're going to jump into is some N64. Now in terms of the rendered resolution, I have this set to 2160 by 1620, and I found that at this resolution I had consistently good gameplay with the exception of a couple titles. That being said, even if you drop the resolution down to 1920 by 1440, you still get an incredibly crystal clear picture along with great performance. Now, in terms of the games that I'm going to demo, I decided to show off some of the more difficult to emulate games. For example, we're going to start with Cruisin' USA, and as you guys will see in the video, I do get a solid 30 FPS, which is incredible for this type of game. The next game that I show off is GoldenEye because that is a fan favorite, and you guys will see that it does run incredibly well at this high resolution, just the same. And then finally, to round up N64, I decided to throw on some Conker's Bad Fur Day because this is probably notoriously the most difficult N64 game to emulate, and a lot of emulators struggle with this one. So I will show you this. Now, this is one of the ones that I did drop the resolution a little bit to get slightly better gameplay, but it does run and it is completely playable. Now moving on to the next emulator, we're going to emulate on Redream, and to no surprise, we have near perfect emulation with Redream on the Samsung Galaxy S10. We're currently going to be pushing a resolution of 2560 by 1920, and in terms of the games that we're going to take a look at, we're going to start off with Crazy Taxi 2, and as you'll see with all of the Dreamcast games, we're running at a solid 60 FPS right across the board.
I hear it all the time. Yo, man, what are you doing?
Closer. Go to the jewelry
It's
shop.
showtime.
The next game that I tested out is Test Drive 6, and this is actually one of my favorite racing games on the Dreamcast, so I'm just going to show you guys that, but again, we got a solid 60 FPS and it runs incredibly well. And now the last game that we're going to showcase for Dreamcast is Soul Calibur because it is a very intensive game, and I do want to show off that even with a game that does require a lot of power like Soul Calibur, we get a solid 60 FPS all the way around. Now, N64 and Dreamcast emulation is fairly cool, but it's not really that impressive for a device like this. So I decided we're going to take a look at some PSP, some Gamecube, and even some PlayStation 2. So we'll get started with some PSP. Now for this, we're going to be using the PPSSPP standalone emulator, and we're just going to look at some of the difficult games to emulate. So the first one that I'm going to showcase is Grand Theft Auto Vice City Stories, and it actually runs really well with a solid 30 FPS. Next, we're going to take a look at Tekken 6, and again, we've got some really good performance here. And finally for PSP, we're going to take a look at God of War Chains of Olympus. And believe it or not, this is running incredibly well too. Now keep in mind I had all of these running at 3x resolution, which is pretty good, and some of these games could easily run at 4x if you wanted to, but I found that I got the best results from 3x. Now we're going to move on into some GameCube games. So we're going to go ahead and jump into Dolphin, and we are leaving things on the stock settings for this, and I'm just going to show you guys a little bit of gameplay from some of the games here. Now keep in mind, not all games run perfectly well, and there are some emulation issues with the emulator itself, but for the most part we were able to play most games running at full speed. So as you guys saw, Mario Kart is actually running quite well, but we're also going to take a peek at some Super Smash Bros. Now this is one that's not running at 100% full speed, but it is certainly playable, and I'll let you guys check it out for yourselves. And then to finish up the GameCube emulation, I decided to throw on Soul Calibur again, and this is just going to show you just how well GameCube can run on the Samsung Galaxy S10.
I'm through with words.
Battle 1, fight!
And the last thing that we're going to take a look at is PlayStation 2 emulation, and I'm going to be running this on the Damon PS2 emulator. Now I know that there's a lot of issues with the emulator. Now keep in mind that PS2 emulation is still in its infancy on Android devices, but it is actually really cool just how good performance can be on certain titles. There's a ton of games that just simply won't run at all, and some that do run, but they are so bad that you could not play them. But I will show off a few games that are not running at full speed, but running well enough that you could certainly play them. And we're going to start off with Tekken 5 just to show you what I mean. Next, we're going to go ahead and take a peek at some Rayman 3 Hoodlum Havoc, just to show you guys how well this is running. Now in terms of this game, we do have some major frame rate drops. We drop down to about 40 FPS from 60, which can really slow down gameplay and affect the playability, but if it is something that doesn't bother you that much, you could probably play through the game. Another game that I'm going to go ahead and take a peek at just because I thought it would be fun is the Celebrity Deathmatch game for PS2, and I'm going to go ahead and throw that up on screen as well. I'm not going to do much explaining.
Yeah, I'm bad, baby. Ooh, who ripped it?
Disgusting. I can only hope we're upwind of the ring.
And then finally, the last game that I'm going to display here is God of War 2, which actually is running really well considering how intensive and how many things are happening on screen all at the same time. Keep in mind we do get some major frame rate drops from about 60 FPS, scaling all the way down to as low as 30 FPS on certain parts, but the game is actually fairly playable, and I think that if you're going into this with that in mind, you could probably enjoy it quite a bit. So here's that footage here.
He's killed them all. He still has some of the powers of a god. Run!
And that's pretty much all I've got for you guys. Now, like I said, the reason I did this video is because the price on the S10 has dropped a little bit since the S20 has come out, and maybe you're up for renewal or you're looking to get a new phone. In my opinion, this is a really good option. But that's all I've got for you guys. If you guys have any questions at all about compatibility or any specific games that you were wondering if they run properly on this console, hit me up in the comment section down below. Make sure to give the video a thumbs up or a thumbs down if you did not like it. Thank you so very much for watching, and I'll talk to you guys again real soon.